Today I want to talk about something that sounds beautiful in theory, but feels terrifying in real life. That's faith, surrendering, and starting over. Because starting over isn't cute, it's not aesthetic, and sometimes it's the only way forward. If you're new here, my name is Brandy, and this channel is about healing. It's about intentional living and resetting your life, especially when everything on the outside looks fine, but feels really heavy on the inside. 3 years ago, I walked away from my corporate job, and I thought that I was burnt out from the corporate life. But later I realized I was burnt out of life. Since then, I've been learning how to rebuild from a place of surrender. How are you guys doing? It's been an interesting weekend. I'm sitting out here on the front porch. It's like 24 degrees, but I really, really needed to be outside. I just couldn't stand being in the house anymore. But I also am a little lazy and don't want to be putting on clothes and getting in the car and driving somewhere. So you should see me. Underneath my coat, I have on my robe and I have on my Ugg slippers. But hey, a girl's got to do what a girl's got to do. I was thinking about, what I wanted to talk about and brainstorming. And it's interesting because, for the last 3 years, I've been trying to recover from burnout, and there hasn't been a roadmap, and it's been very challenging and frustrating at times because what I've come to realize is that I have turned myself inside out. Basically, I am completely shifting my life, shifting my mindset, getting rid of past beliefs and misconceptions. And I got up this morning and I watched church online. I watched Rock City. Well, I didn't realize what I don't even think I clicked to watch a specific episode. The video just started playing, and unbeknownst to me, it was a sermon that was recorded in December of last year. But I thought it was today's service until, at some point in the sermon. And towards the end, actually, that's when I realized that it was from 2014 because a banner came on the bottom of the screen and said December 14th, 2025. And I don't know, something about giving. And so I was like, oh, wait a minute, because PMJ kept talking about 2026 and how it's going to be, God is going to work exponentially and expediently. And so it was interesting because, as I was brainstorming yesterday and the topic was faith and surrender and starting over, for me to have been guided to this sermon and it just started playing automatically is something, because let me tell you, let me pull out my notes here. All right, so hold on a second, stand by. Okay, sorry about that. So I got to my notes. So the title of the sermon is Blessed with the Gift of Hope. And basically, Pastor Mike was talking about greatest gift is a sacrificial offering given to God out of gratitude from the heart and faith for the future. And so he talks about a couple of different things. He talks about an inflection point in your life.
Inflection point. If you ever want to study something, study the inflection point. That is the point of your life where you can either catapult forward or take another lap around the same season. I was at this inflection point.
And so he talks about you can live life in 3 ways. And it's, hold on, I gotta put my gloves on because it's a little cold out here. But I want to stay here because I just need to be outside. So bear with me. And then eventually I might say uncle and go inside. But we just gonna brave for the elements. Okay. So it says that he says you can live your life wasted. And basically that's selfishly. It's a wasted life isn't about the, not having the lack of talent or opportunity or calling. It's about putting yourself at the center. And then he talks about living wrecked. And basically living wrecked equals living sinfully. He says that sin fractures alignment and living in agreement with God, and basically prevents you from living in agreement with God's design, direction, and desire for your life. And then he says you can live winning, and that's sacrificially. And so who you are and how you live and what you pursue match what God intended for you. So I thought this was really interesting because then he goes on to talk about faith, or at least this is what I'm going to focus on because it pertains to my brainstorming yesterday. But he said, the gift of hope is the divine ability to stay convinced on the inside when nothing makes sense on the outside. Faith is now, hope is next. Faith is when we believe God. Hope is when we expect God. And so I thought that, wow, that's really powerful because yesterday I felt like I am at the end of my road. I made a video and that's what my thumbnail says is at the end of the road. And one of my cohorts, Amy, sent me like a 5-minute audio message because my video really resonated with her. And Amy is doing, in my opinion, great right now in terms of her content. And she's the Gen X Big Sister, Blueprint Breakers is her podcast. And she talks about women who are, doing extraordinary things, living outside of what society has said or defined for us as women. So anyway, she reached out, poured into me, basically. It brought me to tears because I feel alone because I'm going through this change. And Amy reminded me what is happening. I am turning myself inside out. And I've said in other videos that it's difficult to heal in the environment that caused trauma. And it's difficult to heal when you're doing work and you're changing, but your environment, the people around you aren't in sync. I am reminded when I was on a weight loss journey, my husband is tall and slender, and I felt, and this was when my son still lived at home, I felt like it was challenging for me because I needed to eat certain things, but as soon as my husband misses a meal, he's dropping 5 pounds. So I'm like, I don't want him to be losing weight, but I'm trying to lose weight. And so it was just this disconnect. And that's how I feel right now in my life. I feel like I am surrounded by people that are on different journeys, but our journeys aren't aligned. Excuse me. And so it's been challenging because when you start to grow and you start to change, it causes people to take a look at themselves. And it can either be inspiring and they want to do it, or they can be, resentful that you're growing, that you're changing. The things that you used to tolerate that may have benefited them, that's no longer the case. That's why I've just wanted to run away. I told you before, I want to run away for a lot of different reasons. At times it's been, to start a new life. And, I've realized that I have to change me because it doesn't matter what destination I'm in, what location. If I'm still of the same mindset, of the same habits and things, I'm just going to carry those with me. You could take the person out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the person. That's it. So if I'm traumatized, if I'm broken, if I'm not living in faith, I'm just taking that with me to wherever I go. And so who is that going to benefit? Who's that going to serve? And so I realized you have to put in the work. You have to build this. And it's not just enough of, journaling here and there. It's not just going to counseling. It's a whole, like, I am reshaping my life. And when you're doing that and you're kind of peeling back the onion, peeling back all of the layers, I said, I will be 50 in June. So think about that. I'm dealing with 50 years of shit, for lack of better words, that I'm trying to sort through. And I've been so frustrated and so impatient because I felt like for the last 3 years, I've just been stuck. Like I haven't been making this progress as fast as I would like. I don't even know what timeline I had. I'm lying. The first timeline that I had was, I thought that I would be off work for 6 months and then I would just go back in to the corporate world and pick up where I left off. That was misconception number one. Other than that, I don't know that I've had any timeline associated other than, okay, it's another season. Another 4 seasons have passed, another year, and here I am. And what progress have I made? I'm very results oriented, very ambitious. I like tangible results. That's how I can measure, hey, am I doing a good job? So I have a daily planner. Am I, writing down my goals? Am I hitting these targets? But I didn't have a roadmap for this transformation, this healing. I don't know what the end goal looks like, but I know that one thing that was missing for me was my faith and my walk with God. I was born in Chicago, raised in the church. I went to Trinity United Church of Christ, and Pastor Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. was my pastor, and I went to Catholic school for 9 years. And so God was a big part of my life. I mean, when we were in the church. We went to church school on Saturdays. We were at the church on Sunday. I want to say when I was like 15, 16, I had a job at the church. So, I mean, we were in the church, and not because we were forced to be, but because we wanted to be. But then I went off to college, and my relationship with God and my closeness, I think it diminished. And it was just something that I wasn't actively trying to maintain. And so that's how it's been for most of my adult life. And during this journey, specifically last year, I got to the point, I'm like, something is just not right. It's missing. God has blessed me with a lot over the years, and it's by His grace, not because, I'm deserving or because of anything that I do, but because of His grace. And so that has been important to me because, how can I pray for things? How can I, want changes to be made, but I'm not walking with Him. I'm not consulting Him. And that's where I feel like I've been stuck and I've struggled. God can do anything but fail. He can work miracles. He can change my situation and everybody else's around me. But I wasn't leaning into Him. And so I've been trying to change that. And it's not easy. It is not easy. When Pastor Mike was talking today, he said that sometimes you go through problems and Christians and church folk will be like, oh, I wonder what they got into that, they're going through all of that and blah, blah, blah. And he said, that's not always the case. He said he even goes through things because the devil can see what you have inside of you, what God has for you, and He's going to disrupt that. And so it's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. It's the fact that it's what's inside of you. I've been working to try to really strengthen my faith, to spend time praying daily. I found that the Rock City Church was doing a 21-day fast, and so I started day one. I watched the service, and so what I'm learning again is that things take time, and the transformation that is happening in my life is something that can't be rushed. I've been so focused on the financial aspects and just really the finances, and not really taking this opportunity that, I'm not working, but my needs are still being met, to really transform myself, to really take this time and think and realize the blessings that have been given to me. So busy wanting to get to a destination that I have in mind that I'm not enjoying the journey, because the journey doesn't look like what I envisioned. And Amy reminded me last night that this is just a small piece of time, and it's something that, I have to go through, and that while it seems like it is forever, it's not. When I look back on it, it will be like, yeah, that was such a short amount of time, but right now it feels like an eternity. I just want to encourage you to just hold on, to not only have faith, but have hope, because faith is now and hope is next. And so with that hope, comes expectation. Pastor Mike says expectation influences behavior. So you can have the faith, and we talked about that, faith and making your move and putting it into action. But then there's hope, and you expect God to bless you. You expect him to show up and work in ways that only he can. And so with that also comes a behavior. And he said too that you can tithe all you want. He said, don't give my church, don't give me an offering if you're going to turn around and talk about, something negative. So say you tithe, but then you turn around and you are basically doubting, what God can do and what your tithe represents, and trusting him and giving back to him and giving an offering. And so he said, keep your money, because if you don't believe it and you're doubting, then that doesn't do you any good. And so he took the sermon that I watched today from the book of Luke, and it was the message was about Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, and how they were both old, and the angel Gabriel told them that they would have a child, and the child would be named John. And Zechariah didn't believe, and he doubted, and so Gabriel said, you're not going to speak until your child is born, because I want you influencing your wife and her faith and her hope. And so that's where Pastor Mike was saying, don't give me your tithe and offering and then turn around and talk about it in a negative manner. Don't pray to God to fix your relationship, but then be out bad-mouthing your husband. Don't pray for something and then you have to speak words that are in alignment with what you're praying for, what you're asking, what you're believing. I haven't done that. And it's a process, and the biggest thing that we can give ourselves is grace. We're figuring it out. We're human. We aren't God. We're going to make mistakes. Amy reminded me of that. She also reminded me of that my hormones are exacerbating the things that I feel right now. They're all over the place. And I'm remembering that. Just want to encourage you, as I encourage myself, to have the faith, have hope, surrender to God, stop trying to control it. And sometimes it's okay to start over. I think starting over is good, because at least when you're starting over right now, you're starting over with a lot more than you did when maybe you started some years ago. Now you're starting over with experience, with wisdom, with, you've handled some situations. God's brought you through. You have a new faith, or a bigger faith, a bigger hope. It is perfectly okay. So I thank you for watching. I thank you for being here, and I want to talk to you tomorrow.